You dare defy me, a worthless wife who's out of her league. John yelled, and then he threw me into the shed. I hit my hip on something that was lying around and groaned. Meanwhile, John had closed the door. The inside of the shed was enveloped in darkness in an instant. I rushed to the door. I banged on the door over and over. But the door did not open. John must have done something from the outside. The door was heavy, and I felt overwhelmed by despair. Is this my fault? No, I had been aware of John's flashy affairs since we were dating. But I turned a blind eye. Because I loved John. But there's a limit. And today was it. When I confronted John about the affairs, he flew into a rage, and here I am. I won't forgive him. No matter what, I'm going to get out of here and show John a thing or two. But I can't think of a solid plan. As I was overwhelmed with burning emotions, I heard the door open. I'm Susan Parker, a 44-year-old housewife. I live with my husband, John, who is 5 years younger than me. We don't have children. John didn't want them. I had dreamed of becoming a mother, but by the time we got married, I was already 35 and it was harder to get pregnant. But now I think, maybe it's better that we didn't have kids. John is just too problematic as a father, and I shudder at the thought of interacting with our child in my current mental state. I met John 12 years ago. I was 32, and John was still a young 27. He was a colleague at work, always admiring me. I was immediately attracted to John. He was handsome, bright, and sociable. But I could hardly call myself beautiful, and considering the age difference, I thought there was no hope. Then, out of the blue, John confessed his feelings for me. I couldn't believe it, but I was so happy that I immediately said yes. Our relationship started off well at first. John could tell I felt inferior about my age and looks, and he told me not to worry about such things. I was happy. It was a mystery why John chose me as his girlfriend, but as long as I thought he loved me, it felt like all my problems were solved. But that was naive. As our first anniversary approached, John's true nature began to reveal itself. John always used the same excuse that he forgot his wallet, making me pay for all our date expenses. We used to split the bill, so this was not only financially painful but also made me see John as dishonest for always using the same reason not to pay. Once, I tried saying I had forgotten my wallet before John could. This was right after we met up. John immediately said, "Go get it. Your house is close, right?" "Close? I came here by train. It's impossible." He just nodded indifferently, then turned his back on me. "John, if you don't have money, we can't go on a date. Let's call it a day." With a casual wave, John disappeared into the crowd. I could only stand there in shock, watching him leave. I began to feel uneasy about my relationship with John. I wondered if I could ever be happy with him. Even so, I couldn't leave John. I've only ever been in relationships with 2 men, including John. The first was during my student days, and we broke up before even half a year had passed. He found another girl. As for John, he's quite popular with the women at work. He knows it too and skillfully delegates his tasks to them. He hasn't done that to me yet, but who knows when he might change his mind. I became more and more timid. Even more, I became dependent on John. John would smile at me. He would speak sweet words. I deluded myself into thinking this was a privilege only for me, just to get through the days. But John never understood these desperate thoughts of mine. One day at work, I overheard John talking with another male colleague. "Susan? Yeah, I'm dating her. For now, she's the best option. She's older, but she pays for dates and sometimes gives me things like watches. I think she'd be good for marriage. The other 2 are too extravagant with money, so they're out of the question." 3 women. John was dating 2 other women besides me. Secretly, I hired a detective. I wanted to prove that what I had heard was a misunderstanding. But reality was cruel. John's other girlfriends were one from our office and another from a client company. In the end, after much contemplation, I decided to overlook John's extensive dating history. John chose me as his marriage partner. Perhaps because I catered to him and never complained about his whims. I believed that once we got married, John's bad habits would disappear. However, after the marriage, he started to be away from home even more blatantly. Upon investigation, I always found that John dated only women in their early to mid-30s. He must find it irresistibly attractive to be economically dependent on and to have women cater to his needs due to their insecurities. John had a girlfriend named Emily Turner. When Emily found out she was being deceived, she came to apologize to me first. "I'm really sorry. John said he was single. It's okay. We're both victims," I said quietly. Emily is 35. The age I was when I got married. She has been dating John for 2 years. For a woman, that's a significant amount of time wasted on John. She was seriously considering marriage with him, which made it all the more pitiful. Emily promised to break up with John. I promised Emily that I would be there for her if she needed me. That day, John was fidgety. He was going on a trip to Hawaii for 3 days and 2 nights starting tomorrow. After he finished packing, John tried to head back to his room early. I was cleaning up after dinner when I suddenly spoke up. I talked to Emily. Huh? John feigned ignorance as if asking who that was. He seemed determined to act as if he knew nothing. I spread out the documents I received from the detective on the table. "I've known all along, John, that you've been dating a bunch of women." "Susan, what are you doing?" John lost his temper. "Yeah, just like you found out. But what's wrong with that? I gave these women a nice dream. It's only natural that I get something in return." Emily was hurt. I shouldn't join him in his anger. I kept my cool. "She believed you were going to marry her. So, what? Are you gonna divorce me, Susan? Then maybe I'd consider it." "No, never mind. She's not attentive enough, and there are better options out there." "John." I was shocked. Honestly, I had expected John to blow up. But the fact that he could casually talk about divorce and weigh Emily as if amused by the situation was shocking. "Well, whatever the case, Susan, you knew what was coming for defying me, right?" "Huh?" I was confused. John was the one doing wrong. Yet, he acted as if I was the one who had broken the rules. He grabbed my arm, forced me to stand, and led me out from the porch to the yard. What stood there was a storage shed. I wondered what was going on as he stopped in front of the shed. Then he threw me inside. "This is what you get for defying me, a worthless wife," John shouted as he threw me into the shed. I hit my hip on something inside and groaned. "John, this has to be a joke." As I turned to say this, John had already closed the door. I was stunned and rushed to the door. It wouldn't open. John must have done something from the outside. Reflect on this. "I'm going out." "Wait. John, wait, you can't leave me locked up here." This was no time for reflection. I would get thirsty and hungry. If I can't get out, I'll wither away. And John was leaving for a trip tomorrow. What would become of me if left alone for 3 days? I thought he might let me out soon. But John's footsteps fade away, and the yard fell silent. The shed had no windows. With the door closed, the inside was pitch black. A sense of vulnerability was creeping up from my feet. Did I really do something so bad? I knew about John's pettiness. But I never thought it would go this far. Does John even care what happens to me? Maybe he really will leave me locked up here and go on his trip. That's when it happened. "Susan?" A timid voice came through. I was startled. The door opened. There stood Emily, John's ex-girlfriend. Emily said she came to see me. She rang the doorbell but got no response, and since the backyard was noisy, she came to check. "I saw John locking you up, hiding. It was terrible." "It's okay. I knew what kind of man he was and still chose to be with him, so this is my own doing. I told myself. I'm glad you were here. But I was dating John. I underestimated you. That's not true. I slowly shook my head. You didn't know anything. You just loved John, that's all. Just like me. Susan. Emily looked like she was about to cry and hastily wiped her tears with the back of her hand. To her, I said, Emily, I need your help. Will you stand up to John with me? What? Emily looked at me in surprise. Stand up to John? What do you mean? I'll explain that now. I beckoned Emily over. When I explained the plan, she looked surprised again, but she nodded in agreement. John was apparently visiting a friend's house. Once we confirmed he was not at home, Emily and I returned to the house. The plan began with John's return. The day he locked me up and the 3 days of the trip passed. John came out into the yard. Surely, everything is all right? He muttered in front of the shed. He must have calmed down and realized the gravity of what he had done. But it was too late. Hey, Susan. Time for reflection is over. You can come out now. John opened the door of the shed. His expression froze at that moment. He rubbed his eyes as if doubting what he saw and looked into the shed again. The result was the same. What? Who are you? In front of John was a woman, not me, sitting with her knees hugged to her chest. In John's mind, I had been locked up all this time. It was impossible for someone to change clothes or hairstyle midway. The woman raised her head. John's face contorted even more. Emily, what are you doing here? Where's Susan? Right here. I stepped out from where I had been hiding. At the same time, Emily stood up. Surrounded by 2 women, John looked back and forth between Emily and me, confused. What are you guys up to? Don't worry. We won't lock you up. We just want you to sit down and listen to what Emily has to say. Emily's story. John scowled, and Emily stepped back as if flinching. Yet, she didn't run away. She opened her mouth and said it all at once. John, I will be suing you for damages since you deceived me. What? John seemed about to explode with anger, but he somehow held himself back. After watching his reaction, I said, John, I want a divorce. You too. What do you two think you're doing, ganging up on me like this? You've been showing dreams to women, right? In return, you accepted their devotion. But it's time to return to reality. Yes. This was our decision. To impose a financial penalty on John. But it didn't end there. John's smartphone rang. Hello, Dad? I'm in the middle of something. I'll call back later. What? Apologize to Susan right now? No way, Dad. I've told everything to your parents. John's face turned pale. Then, time flew by rapidly. John! His father arrived from the family home, furiously scolding his son, John. I had sent all the documents I had received from the detective to his father. I heard everything from Susan. What kind of person are you? From today onwards, I'm cutting ties with you. No, Dad! John cried, looking at his father. But his father seemed resolute. He ordered John to pay the entire compensation to both women involved. Dad! Don't be unreasonable! John clung to his father. Please, I beg you! I'll change! So please, could you at least pay half? Stop it. It was futile. Susan, I'm so sorry. My son is a fool, but I never imagined he would go this far. He won't bother you anymore, I assure you. Please, don't worry about it. He left the next day. John was faced with a hefty alimony demand from the lawyer Emily and I hired, forcing him to pay a significant amount. John's bad reputation quickly spread among both our families. They whispered disownment, and it eventually reached his workplace. I've been fired. all right. I remained indifferent. John hung his head, repeating in a trembling voice, I can't pay.
How am I supposed to pay without a job? Cut off by relatives, I'm cornered.
That's how it is. John. That's the feeling I had when you locked me up. Unable to go anywhere, do anything, cornered and left in the dark. Now, John was experiencing that despair. There was another fact John didn't know. Emily was pregnant. I was surprised. But more than that, I congratulated her. Congratulations. I know being a single mother will be tough, but I believe you can do it. Thank you. I'll do my best to be a good mother. We didn't want John's sins to be passed on to the child. We hoped the child would grow up straight and true, just like its mother. At the same time, I thought if I hadn't given up on convincing John, maybe we could have had another family member. I told Emily I wanted to meet the child once it was born and saw her off. A child, huh? I fiercely wished for a child of my own. After some thought, I decided to adopt a child once my life stabilized. Now that John was out of the picture, I continued living in our house, and there were part-time jobs available at a supermarket nearby. All right, time for me to step up. Life felt more vibrant with a purpose than before. I even made close friends at work, experiencing the joy of mutual encouragement. John had never been one to help me, so this sense of collaboration was refreshingly new. Then came the long-awaited adoption. The process and preparations were extensive and challenging, but I didn't mind at all. I had found her. Not related by blood, but undoubtedly my child. I knew at the moment I saw her. This is the one. The child recognized me as her mother. She innocently called me Mom and showed affection. John, you wouldn't understand, but the joy of having a child is immense. This is my revenge. Moving forward with my life with my newly found daughter. I am not seeking affirmation from John's sweet nothings. Validating and believing in myself. As a person, as a mother. The manager at work said I always seem happy lately. He is 39. Coincidentally, he is the same age as John. But unlike John, the manager is unpretentious, sincere, and a bit clumsy. That's probably why I could open up to a man the same age as John who is nothing like him. You've adapted to the job so quickly, Susan, you're really dependable. Oh, it's all thanks to your guidance. I said, laughing. Then, for some reason, the manager blushed and looked away. Susan, do you have any plans for your next day off? That day, I'm planning to go to the amusement park with my daughter. Oh, I see. I wouldn't want to intrude then. What about your next day off? What's wrong? I had a feeling. The way the manager looked at me was kind. But at some point, that calmness disappeared, replaced by something else. Now I understand. It was the kind of emotion I once had for John. The manager took a deep breath and blurted out. Susan! Would you go out with me? What? From that moment, the manager. Michael became my partner. My daughter was wary at first, but after a few meetings, she warmed up to him. One day, while enjoying tea and snacks with Molly at home, the doorbell rang. Molly said, "Okay," and ran to the door. Then, she came back looking puzzled. It's someone Mom knows. What kind of person? Well, a tall man. At those words, I was startled. There was only one person I could think of. I sternly told Molly not to go out. He's a dangerous person. Got it. Molly sensed my tension and looked worried with her cute face. It's okay. Mom won't lose. I patted Molly's head and headed for the entrance. As expected, a certain person was standing there. Who's that kid? His first words weren't even a greeting. Even though it was so typical of John, I asked him, "What do you want?" "Lend me some money, Susan. You can see, can't you?" Indeed, John looked a complete mess at first glance. Since then, he apparently hadn't found a proper job and had been bouncing from one acquaintance's house to another. Eventually, nobody would take him in, and he ended up living on the streets.
I don't have any money to lend you.
Hey, Susan, you become quite arrogant. Thinking you've beaten me? Life isn't about winning or losing. I thought, but John wouldn't understand. I felt no pity. It was only disgusting. John took a step closer.
Susan, please. This will be the last time. I won't show my face again. I'll go to another state and start over. I just need the money for that.
I sighed. Not seeing him again would be a relief. But does that mean I should help this man?
Mom!
I heard Molly's voice and footsteps. I turned around in a panic. You shouldn't come here, I said to Molly, but she didn't stop.
Don't trouble Mom. If it's money you want, I'll give you some.
With that, Molly pressed 2 nickels into John's hand. John blinked in shock, then crumbled to the ground and began to cry. The innocence of a child. That was the happiness John had once rejected. Molly is going to start elementary school next year, so we went to look at backpacks. Michael was with us. As the 3 of us entered the store, the manager said, "What a lovely family." Molly smiled proudly, and Michael and I blushed.
Mom, I like this color.
Let's see. Molly had chosen an orange backpack. It suited the lively Molly well. This will be my gift, Michael said.
Oh no, that's not necessary.
I tried to argue against Michael's impromptu generosity.
It's a once-in-a-lifetime gift. I want to give it.
Then let's give it together. Molly said innocently. Michael and I looked at each other and nodded. All right. Yes, let's do that. So, we both contributed half and bought the new backpack. Molly was so happy that she didn't let go of the backpack all day. She even hugged it while she slept. Meanwhile, Michael had something to discuss with me.
About the wedding venue. I don't need a wedding, Michael. I didn't have one with John, my previous husband. I'm not of the age to wear a wedding dress anymore.
That's not true.
I want to see you in a wedding dress.
Michael insisted. I remembered John, who had grudged even buying a wedding ring, let alone wedding expenses. Michael was different. He proposed to me with a ring. Now, we are saving for the wedding.
Molly wants to see Mom in a dress too, right?
Yeah. Michael cleverly won Molly over to his side. I had no choice but to surrender with a smile. For the wedding, I embarked on a diet. Thanks to my efforts, I was able to wear the dress of my dreams, which made me very happy. I could never thank Michael enough for proposing the idea of the ceremony. During the wedding, Michael became so moved that he started crying, causing a bit of confusion among friends and colleagues. I ended up having to calm Michael down throughout the ceremony, but it turned out to be a wonderful and memorable event. After the ceremony, I sold the house I had lived in with John. There were memories, but they were all filled with lies from John. Michael's condo was small, but it felt right for our new beginning. At the center of the room, we displayed a wedding photo. Both Michael and I were smiling shyly at the camera. Molly started elementary school. Thanks to her personality, she seemed to fit in quickly with her school. When she comes home from school, she shares stories of her adventures and friends.
I came in first in the race.
That's amazing. Just like the daughter of me and Michael. Not just Molly, but Michael blushed too. I am deeply grateful for having met these two and becoming a family. My previous life was all about pleasing John, depending on him. It was my life, yet it felt like it was all for John. Now, I am living a life for myself. Not just for myself, but for Michael and for Molly as well. Our future is bright and shining.